Imagine waking up one morning to find your husband dragging you to the town square not for a walk, but to sell you to the highest bidder. No lawyers, no divorce papers, just a rope around your neck and a price tag on your dignity. Sounds like something from a barbaric age, right? Well, welcome to Victorian England, where selling your wife was not only real, it was common. But the truth behind this bizarre, humiliating practice is far darker than a quirky historical footnote. It's a brutal window into how marriage, poverty, and patriarchy twisted human lives beyond recognition. Let's dive into the shocking world of wife selling and the horrific reasons it even existed in the first place. To understand wife selling, you have to forget everything you think you know about love, marriage, and respect. In 18th and 19th century England, especially among the poor, marriage wasn't a sacred union, it was a legally binding contract. And getting out of it? Practically impossible. Divorce was expensive, time-consuming, and only available to the rich. In fact, before 1857, if a man wanted to legally divorce his wife, he had to get a private act of parliament. That's right, like passing a law, just to leave your spouse. So what did working-class men do when they couldn't afford a divorce? They sold their wives quite literally in public markets. It wasn't a metaphor. It wasn't symbolic. It was brutally real. The husband would take his wife often with a halter around her neck, waist, or arm like livestock and parade her through the town square or local cattle market. He would announce the sale, sometimes post an advertisement, and invite bids. Sometimes the wife would stand silently in shame. Other times she agreed to the sale because she hated her husband just as much, and the buyer was her lover. Prices varied. Some women were sold for a few shillings, others were traded for ale. In one notorious case, a man sold his wife for a quart of beer. Yes, a quart of beer. But don't be fooled into thinking this was just some quirky peasant ritual. Behind the drunken laughter and shouting crowds was a society that saw women as property disposable and transferable. Was wife selling legal? Well, yes and no. Technically, the British legal system never officially recognized it, but at the same time, it didn't stop it. Authorities turned a blind eye, especially when the sale involved consent from both husband and wife. This created a weird legal loophole. If all parties agreed husband, wife, and buyer, the sale was seen as a mock divorce. Courts rarely interfered, and communities often accepted it as a legitimate way to end a marriage. In fact, some magistrates and local officials even recorded these sales, treating them like civil transactions. So while not legal in the strict sense, it became a tolerated, even institutionalized part of rural working-class culture. Now comes the real horror. These sales weren't just about men wanting to get rid of their wives. They were often born from desperation. The Industrial Revolution had created crushing poverty. Wages were low, jobs were unstable, housing was miserable. In this climate, a man might see his wife as one more mouth he couldn't feed. Selling her wasn't just a way to escape marriage, it was a form of economic survival. And for some women, as horrifying as it sounds, being sold was a way out, especially if they were trapped in abusive or loveless marriages. Remember, they couldn't file for divorce themselves. Selling was their only escape. But make no mistake, the power imbalance was always tilted against the woman. Even if she agreed, the act of being tied up and auctioned off like cattle was nothing short of degrading. Let's talk about some real cases that bring this horror to life. In 1832 in Yorkshire, a man named Joseph Thompson sold his wife Mary to another man, along with their child, for just 1 shilling. When asked why, he said, "I bought her in better times, and I'll sell her now." In another case in 1837, a woman named Hannah Mountney was sold by her husband in Smithfield Market. But things took a dark turn when a fight broke out between bidders. One man claimed she was defective and demanded a refund. Yes, a refund, for a human being. And perhaps the most bizarre of all. In 1790, a wife was sold not for money, not for beer, but for a dog. The buyer offered his Newfoundland in exchange and the deal was accepted. She was literally swapped for a pet. You'd think such a disgusting practice would bring shame on everyone involved. But here's the twisted part, not always. In some rural areas, wife selling became almost ritualized. Crowds gathered, musicians played. It was treated as entertainment like a grotesque village fair. Newspapers even reported the events with tongue-in-cheek humor, describing the lot as if the woman were livestock. A fine, plump wench, well-tempered, sound of limb, and free from vice. Some wives were even happy to be sold if the buyer was a lover or someone they trusted. In these rare cases, the sale felt like liberation. But even then, the underlying truth remained. Women were not seen as full people. They were things to be passed from one man to another. Even if the wife wanted out of the marriage, the public humiliation was undeniable. Imagine being dragged through mud and stairs, being laughed at, priced, touched, mocked, children watching, neighbors gossiping. Your entire identity reduced to a joke. Even in the most consensual sales, the psychological damage must have been unimaginable. Some women tried to fight back, a few resisted publicly, others escaped before the sale could happen. But options were few and the law was never on their side. So when did this madness stop? The decline began in the mid-19th century, especially after the 1857 Matrimonial Causes Act made divorce more accessible to the working class. Public attitudes also began to change. Victorian morality, ironically obsessed with decency, began frowning on such public displays. Newspapers started condemning the practice. Feminists and reformers spoke out, and gradually what was once tolerated became taboo. By the early 1900s, wife selling had almost completely disappeared, though a few rare cases popped up even into the 1920s. Yes, the 1920s. Today, wife selling seems like a relic from a savage past, but don't be too quick to dismiss it. At its core, it reveals something chilling about society then and now. It shows how poverty dehumanizes, how systems built by and for men can destroy the lives of women, how tradition can justify cruelty, and how people, when pushed to the edge, will accept even the unacceptable. And while we may not auction wives in marketplaces anymore, the idea of ownership, control, and disposability of women, that mindset still lingers in other, quieter ways. If this dark chapter of history shocked you, it should. But the only thing worse than horror is forgetting it ever happened. Hit that like button if you believe history needs to be told uncensored. Subscribe to History Hide In for more raw, haunting stories from the past, the kind your school books left out. And let us know in the comments, which bizarre historical practice should we cover next? Until next time, remember, what we call progress was often paid for in blood, humiliation, and pain. Don't look away.